Hey, Chris from the Mighty Decibel here with our first ever Rank the Discography video. And what better band to start out with than the originators of heavy metal, the mighty Black Sabbath, who just happened to be this metalhead's favorite band. So a couple things before we start. As you can see, I'll be using the scoring scale out of 10, and as I go through the albums chronologically, I'll place them in their appropriate bucket, and then we'll circle back later to order the albums within each category. And secondly, I've been a fan of the band since the early 70s, thanks in large part to an older brother having all the 70s albums in his collection. That said, my preferences for Sab's albums will likely differ from yours, but that's half the fun, isn't it? So let's get going. Up first, the self-titled debut from 1970, so no less than the very first heavy metal album, and the reason for all the metal noise that followed. So no doubt a historically important record, but that doesn't necessarily mean a great album. So sure, side 1 kicks ass, but let's be honest, side 2 sounds like a band going in to record an EP, and at the last minute being told to record a full album. It just sounds like a band jamming to fill space. And additionally, there's a little datedness to this thing, and the overt blues references are a little too obvious. For those reasons, I'm giving this a 7 out of 10, so let's move her into that category. Some 7 months later, still in 1970, Sabbath issued Paranoid, the biggest selling record of the whole discography, hailed by many as the band's best. Me, on the other hand, I have never embraced this thing, finding the big hits, War Pigs and Iron Man, of course, they're too lumbering and uninteresting, and the title track, it's okay, but overvalued in my mind by the masses. It was just a last-minute addition to fill out the record, after all. So the dated and blues references are also still on display as well from the first album. That said, Fairies Wear Boots and parts of Electric Funeral and Hand of Doom stand out. I can hear the cries of sacrilege, but I rate this as a 7 as well. So to me, the meat of the Sab discography really starts with album number 3, a year later in 71, with the release of Master of Reality. So here's where the band jettisons the datedness and blues references, fully embracing the majesty of trad metal and doom. And leading the charge, of course, is guitarist Tony Iommi, who rips off riff after riff of elephantine heaviness that still kicks ass today. After Forever, Children of the Grave, Into the Void. What more do you have to say? A perfect 10 out of 10. No question. So on to 1972 we go, where the band issued Volume 4. So regular visitors of the Mighty Decibel know that I often cite this record as one of the top 3 albums of all time. So right off the bat, you know it's going to be rated a perfect 10. The despondent aura, the crushing riffage, the top-notch performances by all band members. This record represents all that is good about heavy metal. So some may complain about changes, the ballad, but I find the dirge works perfectly well here, and Ozzy provides one of his best vocal performances. And yeah, the Soundscape FX is a little overlong, but it does set up the greatest riff of all time, Supernaut, of course, so all is forgiven. Perfection. So let's move this one up to the 10 category. And so next up, the band kept cranking them out. And in 1973, we have Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Here the band stretch out artistically, taking chances with progressive sections, the addition of synthesizer, harp, bagpipes, and flute, taking Sabbath to places they hadn't visited to date. That they did this without alienating the fan base displayed the songwriting greatness of the band, second to none. For some reason in my youth, this record is the one I seem to play the least, so now I find myself reaching for it later on in life when looking to revel in 70s Sabbath. Another perfect 10 out of 10. Okay, so then 2 years later, we're talking about Sabotage, issued in 1975. So whereas the previous Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath can be perceived as an artistic triumph of experimentation, Sabotage, on the other hand, finds an unhinged Sabbath bashing the listeners over the head. So clearly angry over its financial and legal wranglings, the band bludgeoned with the likes of Opener Hole in the Sky, Symptom of the Universe, while going certifiable for the likes of The Writ and Am I Going Insane? And I love the choir-led instrumental Superzar, sounding absolutely otherworldly. Another 10 out of 10 on my scorecard. So let's move her up there. So then the following year, we move into Technical Ecstasy. So that's in 1976. So definitely the chinks in the Sabbath armor here. It's not that it's a bad album, it's just that it doesn't meet the godlike status of the previous 4 records. There's Backstreet Kids, Rock and Roll Doctor, and Dirty Women. They all live up to expectations, but the rest of it is just a step down in quality. So I'm going to rate this as a 7 out of 10. Okay, so then what's next? Another 2-year wait, and Never Say Die in 1978. The band dealing with personnel issues during the period. Ozzy in, Ozzy out, Ozzy back in. So the resultant album continues to split the fan base, detractors perceiving the album as a failure. Me, I'm definitely on the positive bandwagon. Some of this could be due to the fact that it was my first Sabs album I picked up as a new release, but I stand clear-headed on this. Never Say Die is a magnificent record and a great comeback after the somewhat disappointing Technical Ecstasy. Johnny Blade, Junior's Eyes, and the title track are top shelf Sabbath, right up there with tracks from the big 4 70s releases, while the rest of the album ain't no slouch either, including the jazzy air dance. I love that one. So in fact, along with Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, this is the 70s Sabs album I reach out for the most these days. A very strong 9 out of 10 on my scorecard. So then up next, the band say goodbye to Ozzy and welcome former Rainbow vocalist Ronnie James Dio for the Heaven and Hell record in 1980. So back in the day in my hometown of Toronto, our local radio station, Q107, would spin whole records if deemed important enough. So I distinctly remember hearing this album for the first time over the airwaves the day it was issued, and immediately I knew that this was a game changer, not just for the band, but for the metal genre as a whole. The production, the performance clarity, the joy of the players just leaps out at you. No question, this is one of heavy metal's holy grails. Perfect 10 out of 10. So then, striking while the iron was hot, the band returned the following year in 81 with Mob Rules, albeit without Bill Ward in the fold, with Vinny Appice taking over the Skins. So here we find the band digging deeper, relying on riffs and aggression, a more combative album, as it were. So talking about riffs, Falling Off the Edge of the World is up there in my top 10 Iommi riffs of all time, just a mind-blowing track. And Dio's performance rules once again, so while the rest of the band attack with the confidence of veterans of their craft, I saw them live twice on this tour, and I can confirm that the wall of sound bludgeoning was just glorious. 10 out of 10, no question there. So what's up next? The band fractures in two. Dio and Appice going off for the Dio venture, while Bill Ward returns. And taking over the vocals, to everyone's surprise, including his agent, was ex-Deep Purple alumnus Ian Gillan. So the resultant Born Again album is another record that has split the Sabbath fan base, some proclaiming that the production wounding the product beyond repair. Me, on the other hand, I don't mind the muddy production values, seeing this as a plus, giving this a heavier-than-thou aura to the thing. So I perceive this in the same vein as Sabotage and an unhinged Sabbath lashing out in fury. And man, Gillan's vocals are absolutely insane on this thing. His performance on the title track alone is one of my fave vocals of all time. Just harrowing stuff. Yep, another 10 out of 10. So next up, unfortunately, there wouldn't be another album from the Gillan era as the vocalist returned to the Purple Fold. The remaining threesome fractured, leaving Iommi by his lonesome. So ostensibly created as a solo album, Seventh Star ended up being issued under the Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi moniker instead. And here again we have an album that many don't like, but I do. Sure, this is a hard rock album rather than a metal record, but the writing on this thing is top notch. Each track belonging on my Sabbath 101 file, and Glenn Hughes' bluesy vocal performance works a charm with this type of writing. Yeah, that's another 10 out of 10 in my books. As a side note, I'm not an easy grader. This is simply a case of the world's greatest band earning their stripes. No other band comes remotely close to having the number of perfect 10s in their discography. So yet another personnel upheaval as Iommi takes in Tony Martin on vocals for the 1987 Eternal Idol. So this is my personal fave Martin era album. It contains some of Iommi's best riffs, and Martin's Dio-like vocals slide in perfectly. Some great tracks are on this thing. The Shining, Hard Life to Love, Glory Ride, Born to Lose, Lost Forever. This is top shelf Sabbath. I don't know why people ignore this one. An underrated record. I scored as a 9 out of 10. On the other hand, we have the overrated Headless Cross album issued 2 years later in 1989. So I consider this the gothic goo period of the band, the writing formulaic to the point that I don't ever listen to the thing. A fall from grace to these ears, boring, bland, uneventful. I scored as a 5. To the basement it goes. So then next up, the second of the gothic goo period, Tear, issued a year hence in 1990. I don't particularly like this one either, obviously, but I have to admit that the writing is much improved. There's the Lawmaker and the Balladic feels good to me, especially standing out. I'd give this a 6.5. So lo and behold, the Mob Rules lineup performs for Dehumanizer in 1992. Unfortunately, this one doesn't live up to the glorious heights of its two previous releases, but it's still a strong record. There's the speedy Time Machine in the title track, along with I and Buried Alive. They both sparkle. Too bad the rest lumber along, not providing enough bench strength. That said, this is still an obvious improvement over the last few Sabs records. I scored as a 7.5. So, what's next? Alas, the band fracture once again. Iommi and Butler going back to Tony Martin for 94's Cross Purposes. I'm in a minority on this one, but I think this record is marginally better than the previous Dehumanizer. The overall writing's stronger, more memorable. So standouts for me being Psychophobia, Back to Eden, and The Hand That Rocked the Cradle. Also rates a 7.5 on my scorecard. So Gone as Geezer, smartly reading that tea leaves, abandoning a sinking ship for 95's abysmal Forbidden. So Iommi reforms the Tear lineup instead. Yay. Generally perceived as Sabbath's worst album, it certainly competes for the crown in this fan's eyes. The production is rudimentary, courtesy of Ernie C. The writing is banal and boring. This was a defeated Sabbath going through the motions. Rates a 5 out of 10. Okay, so the Tear lineup is put to rest, thankfully, with the Mob Rules unit reforming under the Heaven and Hell moniker until Dio's passing in 2010. However, in 2013, the unfathomable becomes fathomable. Ozzy returns to the Sabbath fold some 25 years after the Never Say Die record for the imaginatively monikered 13. So the album shot up to number 1 on the UK and US charts, the pent-up excitement obvious from the sales. Unfortunately, the music didn't match the hysteria. So cutting to the chase, 13 sucks. It contains nary a riff or a track worthy for extraction in one Sabbath 101 file. I've only listened to this thing once or twice and falling asleep in the overlong process. Really, I wonder how many people have revisited this thing in the last 5 years. Let's give it a 5, shall we? And move it into the bucket. Okay, let's clean up the buckets now, shall we? In the 6 and below category, tier being a 6.5 leads the pack here, so we're going to move that one up front. Then next, move up front here. Yeah, I'd say Headless Cross next, followed by Forbidden and 13. So that's good. 13 bringing up the rear, the worst in my opinion. Sad to see the last 2 albums in the basement here. So we got 5 in the 7 bucket. So I'd place Cross Purposes up front, and Dehumanizer following closely behind that. And because these 2 were 7.5s, and these 3 are all 7s, I'd put Technical Ecstasy first, then the self-titled, and then Paranoid. Yes, I hear the howls. We have no 8s, and then the 9s, I would leave it as is, and Never Say Die coming in first, and the Eternal Idol would be after that. Now we're getting into the, this is really hard here, trying to arrange the 10s, but as we said, Volume 4 has to come first, in my opinion, one of the top 3 albums of all time. That would be followed by the classic Heaven and Hell. And then close, right behind that is Master of Reality. Then I put leave Sabbath Bloody Sabbath there, with Mob Rules immediately after that. And then Born Again would be damn close to that. So that leaves 7th Star and Sabotage. I prefer 7th Star over Sabotage. Again, I know most people wouldn't say that. But there you have it. This Uber Sabbath fans discography ranking, likely looking very different from yours. That's okay though, we're all sab heads after all. So thanks for watching, and remember to check out the Mighty Decibel socials and YouTube channel for more metal mayhem. Take care, eh?